Good. Are we starting?
Yep.
All right. I'll call this meeting to order. We'll do some introductions. I'll start. My name is Jennifer Rasmussen. I'm a member of the Citizen Advisory Committee.
I'm Barbara Fryer. I'm the new city planner at Astoria.
I'm Gail Hendrickson, Community Development Director.
I'm Callie Spiller. I'm also part of the Citizen Advisory Committee.
Carol Webster, visitor.
Christopher R. I'm on the County Planning Commission and a local resident.
There's a big one. I wasn't even in Astoria.
Well, Astoria by name, but not inside the urban growth.
I didn't know that.
Just
I'm
calling
Mara
what
Patrick. I'm on the
you.
planning commission, and I am a local resident. I live over by Big Creek Hatchery.
I'm Dirk Roan, I'm on the Citizen Advisory Committee.
John McKesson lives in Roswell.
Cheryl Johnson, Citizen Advisory Committee.
Kelly Huckerstein, Citizen Advisory Committee.
Victoria Sage, Classic County Planner.
Great. Welcome, everybody. We'll review our last meeting minutes. Do we have to approve them or anything, or we just...
Yeah, just let me know if there's any corrections, but they don't have to be formally approved.
Cool. That's fine to me. Does anybody want to say anything else about the last meeting summary? Great. Report from Cheryl, our locally countywide CAC liaison.
As you all may recall, the countywide one has representatives from each of the areas, and they have 6 representatives from 5 areas. There's one where 2 of them are sharing it. So it's those folks, and Gayla, are there 7 of the at-large persons?
There are 5 at large and then 6 if you count the double up in the planning areas.
And then 5 at-large persons. And they have met twice now, Gayla?
3 times actually.
3 times. It's a nice variety. For instance, one of the people on there is Jan Mitchell, who, as a professional, before she was retired, is a professional planner. So that's a nice skill to have on there. Pat Cohort, I suppose it says Cochran, thank you, is the tsunami expert for Clatsop County and a lot of times in the state. So that's a nice person to have on there. So it's a nice group. The last meeting that we had, they're just one notch ahead of us. So they were discussing the land use. So goal 1. Affordable housing came up. That was a hot topic. And the other one that was a hot topic was the role of the citizen advisory councils. And one of the persons there was from South County, and they had continued their citizen advisory council over time. And we're urging the rest of us to continue over time. So they talked briefly about the workshop. A number of them had attended the workshop on Goal 2 and said that it was very positive. Encouraged all of us to attend the upcoming workshop on Goal 3 and 4. Anything else I miss? Anything else critical, Gail?
I think that sums it up pretty well.
1 minute personal. Immediately following this meeting, actually at 6 o'clock, is another meeting, in case you're short on meetings in your life. Right here at 6 o'clock, the Port of Astoria is holding a public meeting, and it's about the strategic plan. I invite you, I encourage you to stay and to attend that one.
And if you're feeling bad about yourself, you should feel better about yourself afterwards.
Because you did 2 meetings back to back?
No, because it's not entirely a happy story.
Oh, okay.
It may be a happy story, but it isn't yet.
It isn't yet.
Just to say.
Yes.
That's a good lead.
And that's all from me.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'll turn it over to the staff for a Goal 2 overview.
Okay, so for those of you who went to the July 31st workshop that Lisa Phipps did, she gave a really good overview of everything, so I'm not going to try and repeat too much since we're condensed in our meeting time today. But really, Goal 2 doesn't have any specific policies that we're aiming for. It's more to say, okay, this is how we're going to conduct our planning process in the county. It identifies areas where we've taken exceptions to certain goals, whether it be resource lands, farm and forest, whether it be the beaches, the dunes, the estuary system, whether it's goals, exceptions to urbanization. So goal exceptions are basically areas in the county where we have told the state that we don't want these goals to apply, and they can't apply for certain reasons, either because the area is already developed in a different type of pattern, or because there's a good reason why we need the land, maybe for an emergency operations center, and it can't go at the beach, but maybe it needs to be somewhere more interior, maybe in a resource zone, something like that. So that's kind of what an exception is. It also spells out where we've got rural communities like Napa and Swenson and Westport, Miles Crossing, Jeffers Gardens, those areas as well. So those would be exceptions to the urbanization goal 14. So when we do a comprehensive plan, our plan has to be consistent with everybody else's plans. So that's why City of Astoria is sitting at the table with us tonight, because you're representing the city. We've got other planning areas where we've invited Seaside and Gearhart and Cannon Beach and Warrenton as well. So we have to be consistent with their plans have to be consistent with ours. All of our plans have to be consistent with the state plans, and then any little plans that we do in there, whether it's your community plan for the Northeast or the plans that the city's working on for the Vista and the Bridge districts and that whole riverfront area, they all have to be consistent with their comprehensive plan as well, and with ours. So there's layer upon layer of consistency and trying to make sure we're all working in the same direction. And so that Northeast isn't pulling in one direction while Southwest is pulling in a different direction. We have to come up with common goals as a county and values that we all share. And then when you get into your community plans, you can get maybe a little more restrictive for your specific area. But again, you have to just remain consistent with the big overall picture. And so I like to think of land use is kind of this pyramid where you start at the bottom with the comprehensive plan, and it's very general and it's nice and it's warm and it's fuzzy and it's not a lot of details though. And then you move up and you get into the zoning ordinances that are going to implement all those warm fuzzy ideas, and that's where you start getting more details. And then as you move up from there, you get things like a conditional use permit where you're looking at a specific site and saying, okay, this is how this one particular property is going to develop. At the very pinnacle of the pyramid, you get to the building permit side of things where you're just looking at a particular building on a piece of property in a particular area. And so it's very detailed and very stringent and narrow in its focus. So that's kind of the pyramid of land use. So we're down here, we're the base of everything. That's what we're working on right now, the foundation for all those other layers that come after it. So that's kind of my brief Goal 2 overview. Basically, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I did put together, it's a PowerPoint in the world where PowerPoint capability exists. Here's a paper version.
We can always do that. Send it up next time if you ask.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, yeah, it's not a problem. That's why
Okay.
we have the huge sheet.
Yeah.
We
So-
didn't figure that.
We have the
We've had
technology.
electricity out here for a while.
Next, you're going to tell me you got indoor plumbing, right?
Some people do if they're fancy.
So anyway, all this really does is, when we're looking for the next 20 years, we're just fortune telling. But we need to base our fortune telling on some facts. What have we identified as the need for housing over the next 20 years? Do we have enough buildable lands? How many residents do we expect? That's why we've got that big population projection packet in there. You want to look at how much commercial, industrial land do you need for economic development. You want to look at demographics. Is the population aging? Is it getting younger? Are they more educated? Are they about the same as we are now? Are we less educated in terms of ethnicities? Are we changing our demographics in any way there? Because all of those things will affect land use. And so, if the trends were to show, which they're not, but say they were to show that you suddenly are expecting a big influx of families with children, then you need to think about, where do we need more housing? Where are we going to put it? Because you want to put it close to services. You want to put it close to schools and that type of thing. What the population projections are showing, in theory anyway, is that unincorporated population is going to decrease. Probably just through people moving out or dying, but also because land's going to get annexed into cities, and that's automatically just taking our population down. The population is getting older, generally speaking, over the next 20 years. So then we need to think again, how do we make sure that people can stay in place? Maybe they have access to services and things in their planning areas, but without doing overdevelopment. So all things to keep in the back of our heads as we're looking down the next 20 years and trying to figure out where we're supposed to be going. And that's really all I have. The questions that are in your discussion packet, the agenda, we don't need to answer all of those tonight. We can continue this to next month or the month after, as long as you need to feel comfortable that you've had a good discussion. So that's it.
And I had emailed you this question before, but it's...
And I didn't get your
No,
answer.
but the one of them was that, is it normal to have findings in this goal? And you were saying it's not, to list all of those findings is a little extreme, especially when you're saying it's the warm, fuzzy, big picture. Listing exceptions is one thing, but 300 pages.
Yeah, every single tax law.
That seems crazy to me.
Yeah.
Looking through that.
So.
I have a question with when we're talking about ways that climate change affect the comp plan. Are we looking at broad goals, like we want our community to reduce emissions by X amount, but we're not actually saying how to do it? Or are we looking at really specific ideas, like new buildings have to be all electric, not gas, or something like that?
Yeah, I think you want to keep it more as general, because what we want to do, and this is actually stated in Goal 2, is that we don't want to get to the point where we lock the county into one particular path to achieve a goal. So we want to be able to have alternatives and to look at those alternatives as well. So a little bit specific is good, but not too specific.
And I looked up policy guides on policy and climate change, and I have some list of broader things that are suggested to be put into planning that I can share with you, or I can just say. I'm definitely, I'm interested. So these are just policy findings. This is from the American Planning Association Policy Guide on Planning and Climate Change. So they talk about land use patterns. I'm going to be very general here, which is compact development, high density development, encouraging transit-oriented development. So transportation and parking policies would be another one. Reuse of historic buildings as opposed to creating new buildings, which take more resources. Green building standards, which is kind of what you alluded to. A range of housing opportunities. Energy generated from renewable resources, kind of more broadly. Development in areas away from hazards. Protecting and enhancing green spaces, promoting water conservation, growing local food for local consumption, and then communications technologies are some of the ones that are listed in here. So they are clearly way more broad. Mm-hmm. But those are some examples of things that they suggest you think about. And so I like all those ideas. How would it be normal to put that into a plan? Our plan hopes to promote, this list of things.
At one point, I was approached by some people who Oregon used to have a lot of programs for alternative energy, wind in particular. So some guy came out and said, it's kind of an opportunity to generate wind power. At the end of the day, I guess specifically to your point, I don't think I don't think it's permitted, like the towers for wind power. So to me, that would be a specific instance where we would need to address how permitting that. And I don't know what else would be entailed.
I feel like goal 2 should just like broadly say we will, like, that will be taken into consideration when doing the planning, and then each individual goal is going to go more in depth, I would imagine, right? But like stating in goal 2 that is like part of the objective seems like a logical first step in my
I had a couple comments. There was a program, I think it was called, coincidentally, the Betsy, and I think Harold Weaver applied to have a couple of windmills up above his place on Aldridge Point there. So I don't know what happened. It didn't happen.
At the end of the day, if it doesn't work and time marches on, then you kind of have to pay for it. So my life is a series of long-term commitments with immediate benefit. So this was just going to be another one of those where I take long-term responsibility for the project. Theoretically, my power bill would not go up over time. And then in 10 years, if it didn't work out, then I'm responsible for what it didn't do. So,
May I comment? Perfect. I look at your place as a hub of not only high ground, but warm bodies, cows to snuggle with following the big quake. And so if you could
you'll be in Mexico.
Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. So that has always been a run-to consideration for the drainage district. And my problem is that as treasurer of Clatsop No. 1 Drainage Improvement Company, your forecast is rather a gloomy death sentence, because as the population decreases, what does it say to all the people who use tax revenues, and which are limited to 1.5%, to fund all the things that we do here, So that's a real concern that, and to Dirk's point, or our community, it would be nice if the drainage district could in some way support him as a hub, a place to run to in an emergency. So if that is possible, and certainly keep the transportation, the ways to get from tideland to the high ground as corridors for humans as well as other species. So that's my concern, is how do we pay for it with this rather bleak forecast of population?
The population outside the urban growth boundaries will decline about a little bit, but the projection is the county overall will increase in population.
I read that. That was very
So
good.
I honestly don't believe it will decrease in our area.
I agree.
I don't know.
I think it
Well,
will.
it's a pretty close number, just
So,
minus
fairly.
Yeah.
less than 1%, so.
I had another question about the projections and climate change, and whether or not climate change migration is taken into account with some of these projections, because I feel like it is going to drastically
Migration or
affect.
outmigration?
I think as people leave areas that become uninhabitable, northern territories like ours may end up increasing, at least, not right on the coast, like our area here, I think could end up seeing a dramatic increase.
Question. What do you guys think how much is the temperature going to go up in the next 100 years? I heard like 1.3
so
Celsius.
it's called global warming, so it's not Clatsop County warming. but what I've read basically is the Pacific Ocean, the North Pacific Ocean has the largest capacity for buffering. So that would be the last region, honestly, to be impacted.
Which is
So
why the
But-
in-migration would be
that would be an element.
Yeah.
But
But
I don't think anybody
answer
can
the
project
question that I
that.
asked.
I don't think anybody can project that.
Well, I've heard 1.3 Celsius over 100 years.
But globally, not.
Yes, globally.
No, I think it's supposed to hit 1.5. I mean, it all depends on, if we make any changes.
So-
By 2050,
From-
I think it could raise up to 3 to 4 degrees Celsius by 2100.
Will we still have petroleum products then?
50 years, maybe more.
The Earth would be unlivable
From
at
the
that
point of
point.
view of
Like,
those of us who live below sea level, it's not the temperature that matters, it's the amount of water in rivers. So I think your metric is not the one we should be looking at. We should be looking at where mean sea level is. And the projections I've seen are, well, they're not that bad. You know, just with the basic warming of the Earth, you can count on 3 feet over the next 100, let's say to 2100, okay? Then if you add in other factors, Antarctica and all kinds of other things, it could be as much as 10 to 12 feet. From the drainage district's point of view, other countries like Holland and Finland have been dealing with this amount of sea level, below sea levelness for a long time, and we hope that we can do that. So please do not add to our burden. Thank you.
I would say in terms of land use planning, there was an article in the Astorian, and they talked about the percentage of estuary that was no longer active, if you want to call it active estuary. So they had taken the liberty to take a drone shot overlooking Brownsby, and I kind of felt the implication was, I don't belong here. I don't belong in Brownsby. We would like to restore it to a wetland, and that's fine, but I want to be paid for it. And somehow that was never a part of the conversation. So I think, I don't know the answer, but somehow monetizing that through not like carbon credit, but wetland credit, banking, or an allowance in that way, somehow creating a mechanism where if we decide that we don't want me there, there's an off-ramp financially. So if you create, like I described, where you have wetland mitigation credits, right now you have to be within a specific drainage area. Well, nobody's going to be developing, the airport here. So there's not really any need for it here, where in Lewis and Clark or even on the John Day River, that's where your mitigation banking would occur, because development occurring in the Warrenton, Astoria seaside area, well then they can tap that. So somehow, I don't know
can
the
I ask
answer.
a question? I just want to clarify that I understand what you're saying. Are you saying like where your house currently is an area that will flood and won't be
I think,
livable
no,
space?
it's not where my house is, but we, Brownsmead as a community is a 3,000 acre community
Right.
surrounded by dikes. And so the aerial photo, looking out across the expanse, the implication is we should restore this to estuarine habitat. And my only point is somehow you have to incorporate landowners.
Right. You're saying we should do that because of climate change?
No,
Okay. This is
I
something
think
separate.
basically people would want to break the dikes to create
A buffer.
more wetlands, or saying that this is marginal land, it shouldn't be habitated. But the conversation, I think, needs to include the residents who live there and create a mechanism where there's a buyout.
Yeah.
That if in fact, basically the farm that my wife and I have a 15-year mortgage on is our 401k. And if we decide that Brownsmead doesn't need to exist anymore, well, I don't have anything because it's not worth anything. So if it's worth
Are you
more to society as restored title land, then somehow in planning, I think, you could have a mechanism that would allow.
I see like potentially that could be extrapolated for other issues in climate change or whatever
Yeah, it's
hazard.
kind of climate.
Exactly, where
climate
if
change
you
issue.
live in a area that then is later deemed as they wanted something else, or that it's vulnerable to climate change, that there should be something with involvement with people that
Right.
live
That
there.
was talked about a lot last night in the climate
Yeah.
debate. I don't know if you
I
guys
think
heard it.
we're good
Right.
where we live, but
Right.
if somebody decides we're not good where we live,
Right.
well then we need to
there needs to be, yeah.
Who is somebody suggesting that? Like, is there an entity right now saying like everybody in Brownsmead should move
Well, the
out?
Astorian wrote about how much of the Columbia has been sequestered or removed from title.
So it was just the newspaper
Yes,
staff,
but
not
I mean,
like
that's
the
the
state
court of public,
suggesting
no,
that.
it's the
So
court of
no.
public opinion.
Sure, no, I
And
hear you.
also-
I just didn't know if there was like a movement in the
Yeah.
state courts or something. To,
Yeah,
like,
I've worked with
I
press.
don't. Okay.
And in the
Great.
past, they would ask me, where are some opportunities that you see we could, and we could go ride around in the river, and I said, this is an abandoned, island. I think you could make it more breathable.
Sure.
Carlson Island would be a case in point where.
Yeah.
So there is money in the pipeline for people looking for projects, and I just thought
Sure.
last month or this, that there was this huge article, and it's like,
Right.
Yeah.
Great. Yes. Cheryl.
So Dirk's concern, I think, is not necessarily tied so much to climate change as it just is a sort of a ecological concern. But the common denominator here is dikes, because Brownsmead originally was part. Anti-gates, yes, was part of the estuary, and then those original Scandinavians came and diked it and drained it, and now it's farmland, but originally it was part of the estuary. And so whether or not we maintain the dikes and the gates is, connected to all of these things, to whether or not people can make a living, to whether or not it's part of the ecology of the river, and to whether or not it's part of
but
the...
I would say in terms of sea level rise, if the sea level rises, people will identify areas that should be, and kind of like the Army Corps of Engineers was a great organization to work with until Katrina happened, and in essence with our flood, my opinion on flood insurance is all of a sudden everybody's doing LiDAR and taking pictures of maps and deciding, my gosh, you guys need to pay a whole lot more for insurance. So it's a way, we're paying for a bus wreck that happened in Louisiana, even though our bus isn't wrecked and has never wrecked. But all of a sudden the cost of living has gone up, and so you could see, to me, it's not that far-fetched to say that
Sure.
if there is sea level rise, then in fact people would identify it as an area of where they would want to create, more estuary habitat or buffer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Comment, please? I too was on Crestport, and 90% of the estuary is behind dikes, roughly, which they have started to breach some. They look at Brownsmead, it's very proactive. I've had people come to the Soil and Water meeting, Hammond, say, we want to breach your dikes. This was about 15 or 20, literally.
Yeah.
And I thought that was rather rude since he was sitting at the Grange, And then I actually have documentation of a county planner and an altercation with us over the rights to maintain and do our deferred maintenance on our dike. I've also had words with Department of State Lands, and there was a huge issue here some years back when they went out for rules and fee changes, and went to the Port of Portland. 3 people show up, do what you want. They come to Clatsop County, and there's 70 people in the room, and 2 years later, they go away saying, on deferred maintenance, we have no jurisdiction. The point I wanted to make to Dirk's comments about how the Corps of Engineers perceives the river. After 96, they had a big, the floods of 96, the 500-year event, the first one. They had a big meeting in Rainier about what was going on. And the Corps describes the river, including Brownsmead, as a series of escape valves. I couldn't think of a word. So that each, one will breach and take the pressure off. That and the fact that they can actually stop the river, which they did in 96. I mean, it was, into the parking lot in Safeway, and they just stopped it. So that even though there were no tides, it was finally got to go out. So it is a core jurisdiction. The county does not have the right to ask us for permits. And please just let us deal with it, And with the permits, and anyway, I'm not going to talk about FEMA flood insurance at this time, The bottom line is, if you have a house in Thailand, the new rates of FEMA flood insurance cost you about $100,000 of value, because that money would have been going to the bank to pay your principal, but now it goes to FEMA, and so they can't pay. But, whatever, $1,000 a month, because they're sending $500 a month to FEMA. So Dirk is in a bad position, and he's in high ground. Those of us who live in low ground are absolutely targeted by the system to drive us out by withholding financing. So, I, like Dirk, believe that we need to kind of take control of our own destiny. The recession showed us one thing about Brownsmead and Thailand, that, people want to be there. Some of our lowest, most slummy houses all got flipped, and they are now legal, permitted houses in Thailand, below the flood line, and I don't care whether you call it the tsunami line or any one of them, it's all the flood line. So let's not get hung up on the temperature, let's get hung up on the height. Let's talk about what's involved in these flood lines, because there are many of them, So thank you very much. Now, I guess I know there aren't findings, but this is a big thank you to Vicki Barrett, who, and actually Sam, Myrna, Barry, and Dirk, who have for the last 25 years done something I didn't have to do. And this is when they gave us permission to start our fire district in 1991, just after Measure 5. So it is totally amazing and totally against land use planning. Joan Dukes and Ron Cease had to go to the legislature and they quieted it. And put in an exception for Lewis and Clark and Brownsmead so we could build our fire halls. So please accept this with my thanks. And let's keep it going for 100 years.
Well, I'd just like to make one comment. I think in general, the way land use planning works is that when you have something that was permitted in the past legally and it's in place today, there's no movement to take that away from anybody or require you to flood your land. The idea of creating more estuary, taking it back the way it would have been in a more natural time, is to find willing landowners to do that, not unwilling landowners. I don't think anybody has an appetite for making your life difficult on the farms. In fact, there's a real move in this county to improve the viability of small farms. And most of this farmland is low down, it's along rivers. I'm on the Soil and Water Conservation District Board. And I'm also on the North Coast Watershed Association Board. And our approach is to find willing landowners to do projects on that make improvements, not to take somebody's land away. And that wouldn't even be allowed in our state courts anyway. So I think there's a lot of concern over something that's very unlikely to even be recommended by anyone.
I also think we're going to need more farming, if we have food shortages nationwide. So I don't think we'll be in a big hurry to get rid of farmland that we have.
Yes, thank you. I wrote down some notes that as I was going through the goal to, just notes sort of to myself, but the first note that I wrote down was that I was impressed at how
Just the
hard
threat of closing.
Oregon has worked to protect farm and forest land. I mean, they talked about that over and over. There is this entire history in the state of Oregon to protect forest land, but also to protect farmland, which I thought was very incredible. So we're going through this whole thing, and one of our goals is to protect farmland. And the other one that was interesting, and you would think I would know it, but 90% of the total land in Clatsop County is forest land. I thought that, so what we're dealing with is 10% of the entire county, which I thought was interesting. And then just while we're hopping around my other two comments that I wrote down. I thought it was interesting that aging in Clatsop County is aging, and at least I thought that it is aging at a much more serious rate than it is. But it says that it is slower than the rest of the state, and that in 2000, the average age was 40, in 2010, 43, and in 2015, 43.9. So it's aging, but slowly, and more slowly than the rest of the state, which was interesting to me. They tend to think that all the young people are leaving, and there's only old people left.
I think there was one of the graphs that I thought was interesting, and I don't know if I was reading it correctly, but it kind of showed, or the way I was reading it, it was like, all of the, what it was what I would expect, which is basically like, right after kids graduate, there's this huge dip, but then, the 35-year-olds come back, or the 25-year-olds come back.
And I thought that was interesting too. We
page.
tend to say, there's not enough work and they all leave, but then the statistics say, but indeed they come back, and they come back when they are childbearing age and
Right, yeah, okay, so it's on page 12.
Or have children here. I thought it was very interesting.
The other one, you also have a lot of retired people that move here because they like this area. They like to come to this. They might get out of the city, so they move here. So that increases the age.
Yes. And the other one that was interesting to me is the statistics say that the housing supply is relatively stable, and housing is the hot topic now. I mean, everybody is talking about there isn't enough affordable housing, and then obviously there's a difference between housing and affordable housing, but that the statistics say that there is enough housing. So I thought that was interesting.
I had a question about, it did say somewhere that there's a lot of people here who have their second homes because of our proximity to Portland, and I was wondering if there's a way through different taxation rates to discourage that, to make it a little bit more expensive to own a second home versus your first single-family home or something.
I think this is a planning thing, but I think your mortgage on a second home shouldn't be tax deferred. And I think the rest of the country, or world rather, read this in The Economist, it basically says that it doesn't really affect patterns of home ownership in places like England, where we basically incentivize people to take out a mortgage. So it's encouraged, but I don't know how we get to go with that.
Could you have to pay more property taxes if you own more property than you pay on your first one? I don't know.
Yeah, it's not so property tax, is your point, but it's something you can defer on your income tax. So that's kind of how America has been operating. So we encourage it, where other countries don't. I don't know how we do that. I think it's a good point, though.
I guess I wanted to point out that.
Sorry, this gentleman
Sorry.
in the corner's been holding his hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, it's close.
And we had to introduce ourselves when we went around.
My name's Kelly Shipley. I bought a house over on Cherry Road, and it's on 1 acre. And anyway, well, that's the reason I'm here. You're talking about housing, and I just looked up in the multiple listing service for Napa Swenson. For houses under $300,000 for sale, there's only one, and it's one bedroom. So I'd like to help out with that. I need your guys' help to do that. It's a 1 acre lot, and right next to it there are quarter acre lots. And I'd like, and the map, I don't know if you want, I'd like to break this 1 acre lot up into 2 quarter acre lots and then the half acre lot.
I'd be able to. Verna, who's on the planning commission, and taking care of his professional staff. The rest of us don't get to decide.
I think you've been talking to Julia.
No, he talked to me.
Oh, do you talk to you?
Yeah.
Plains, they have density credit transfers. So then basically you encourage higher density housing development in a smaller space, and then because it's a density credit transfer, then you open space becomes more permanent rather than having a house every 4 acres. You would have a bunch of houses in a smaller space, and then you have much larger open areas. To me, density credit transfers, having that capacity, and maybe that may help people. I've always thought that the Highway 30 corridor would be a good place for housing, more affordable housing. So.
Then you have to change the zoning. You have to
Yeah.
go from R5 or R2 to,
Somehow we need that flexibility, I think, and I think stuff like the density transfer, or density credits, that, I don't know if that's a mechanism that we could try out.
Is the reason we can't do that what he's suggesting because of septic tanks? Like because we don't have
No, I don't think that's going to be a problem at all.
Just
zoning.
zoning.
It's just zoning.
But I'm saying I think it's zoned that way because they don't want, 4 different septic tanks on an acre plot. I don't know.
That can be a
I think
factor
people
in
saw the
some
writing
areas.
on the wall in like 1972, and then so if you're really on your game and you own property in 1972, you subdivided everything because you knew if you didn't do it then you were done. And so the smart kids did that, and then you have that capacity to buy and sell property. So.
Well, yeah, but if the septic's a problem, of course.
No, there's still all those things still.
But if it's
apply
not,
as a
and it's just
secondary.
a legal thing, it's just somebody needs to make, just give permission. Well,
That would be the Board of Commissioners.
okay, all right.
You need to submit your application to rezone your property, go to the Planning Commission, and then go to the Board of Commissioners and get their...
Yes.
It's actually zoned KSRCR.
So then what's the issue?
It's a 1 acre minimum lot size because he's not on
How big's your property?
public sewer.
1.08.
Oh, well,
And right next door, there's quarter-acre lots. And even on the plat map, or on the map from the county, it shows 75-foot increments, like it's already been, somebody's already thinking about doing it. Otherwise, they just say it was 300 feet by 159, instead of 75, 75, 75, and 75. But, we need more affordable housing. It would make the house that's on there already, I could reduce the price on it, and then I could build 2 more houses that wouldn't be nearly as expensive as if I had to have a 1 acre lot. Well, so do we want to make housing affordable or not?
Yes, sure.
2 thoughts. One is we were talking about second homes, and that was a hot topic at the county-wide one. And it's not much of an issue for us, I think, out here in the Northeast, but it is definitely a topic, in the whole Gerhardt Seaside. So second homes was a hot topic at that one. And then
Did they come up with any ideas about?
No, and Gail, well, there isn't, I don't have all 13 of our goals memorized, but isn't one of our goals housing?
yes, 10, goal 10.
Okay, so we'll focus on that one then, and one of our goals is transportation. Which one is that?
12, I believe.
Yeah, and we, I think, had briefly talked about the need for affordable housing, and that possibly rural Clatsop County, is the place to change it so that we can do duplexes and fourplexes and smaller ones. So I think we just all want to remember that when we get to the housing one. And then the thing that goes with that is, if it's, people also then have to get to work.
Right.
So
Yeah,
then we also have to put that in when we get to the transportation one. So I think for us in the Northeast, those are 2 important topics for us to go deeper into when we get there.
Is there still talk about turning Pipeline Road into a actual
Yeah.
like,
Freeway.
with no logging gates or?
There's been discussion about
Yeah.
it. I don't think there's anything currently being discussed that I'm aware of.
The county has the engineering department, I think his name was Ron Ash at the time. They developed ideas about how to, what you should have are redundancies, loops,
Right.
when there's a car wreck and you
Yeah.
drive around it,
Seriously.
big things.
Yeah.
And honestly, what really makes it more, not, hey, I'd like to have more roads, but, emergency preparedness
Right. Yeah.
becomes an element, I think, that can't be blown off. And
Right.
the county has some great plans on secondary roads that, like that, I think that can be incorporated into the larger system to help alleviate some of those.
How do people feel about like a bike /walking path that's not
They
connected
talked
to
about
Highway
turning the
30?
railroad into
That's
a
yeah,
bike path
that's
at
what I
one
feel
point,
like
but I don't
we
know what
need.
happened to
Like
that.
we need some because
I
I would never ride my bike on the
No,
highway.
me neither.
I know people do, but
It's extremely expensive to build a bike path,
Right.
but I fully agree it would be fantastic.
Yeah.
for
Because they were talking about doing the Portland to Astoria along the old train line, but that, I don't know.
it seems so dangerous. All these
Oh, yeah.
tours that come, like
And the railroad goes on some beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
But there are bridges and it is
Right,
washed out.
yeah.
So,
For sure.
Right.
There was issues. I just heard that they were talking about it at one point.
Bridges.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
I support them.
Yes.
I was going to put a kind of a shout out to the county for the 3 agencies that have been enormously helpful to me in my time since Measure 5. And that is, of course, assessment and taxation. It was such a big deal that they had to redo the thing. So we just couldn't have got through it without Suzanne Johnson. And then over the years, we've had little breaches and county roads. Ted McLean grew up out in our area, now is the big cheese, but he has just been, they are the first responders for all breaches, end of story. So when we've had one near Ryla's, it was minor, but they were still there. I got pictures of Sam Reeves working it, And the other is rather subtle and recent, is, and I believe her name is Harper. She is in assessment and taxation, and she's the one who decides whether you're doing enough ag on your land to qualify for the tax thing. And if you, it's very curious because we wanted to abandon part of our district. There's a little sliver of audios that requires a great deal of money and provides us with just a little bit of revenue. It turned out that if audio went from ag to wetlands, his taxes would go up. So, that's the kind of thing I think you're supposed to talk about here. And I'm not sure, the good news is that when she rattled a lot of the recalcitrant landowners' cage, they all mowed their pastures and they jumped into productivity again. So, as per your wanting more pasture and dirt inspection. So, it's been a very good thing what she did. It wasn't known very much, but those kind of things are very supportive. But anyway, the tax rates are a factor.
Yeah, I don't think people should be able to abuse that entirely, where I had a conversation with somebody, I like a great deal, I think I was along the John Day, and they have a very nice place, but they really didn't want to pay property taxes on it, so they planted Christmas trees and trying different things to try to fake it, even though it failed the income test.
Dikes and tide gates are, again, unique to us in the northeast Clatsop County, but it's also an issue for Warrenton, and it's also an issue for Lewis and Clark. So it's an issue in part of Clatsop County, and again, as we...
16 estuary.
Pardon?
Is that also goal 16?
It's goal 16, 17, but there are some exemptions, and we've
I
taken
saw
an
the exemptions
exception.
in goal 2,
Yeah. So
That's what I was going to say. A big chunk in here of our meeting was that the dikes and the tide gates did get exceptions to the goal. That was a big piece of the reading. So are there additional land use things that dikes and tide gates need to protect them so that they can continue?
The railroad is considered a levy in the paperwork I have from the Corps of Engineers. So
In some cases, it
it
is.
is. Well, anyway, I'm referring to the deferred maintenance inspection reports, and they talk about that in particular. And so it doesn't belong really to Clatsop County. It belongs to the federal government. On top of that is the railroad has an easement. Then at the very top is the drainage district, the landowners, and this is a point that I talked on briefly about right-of-ways, and I don't think we should talk about it tonight. But there is quite a push between the my part of Brownsmead, Long Island number 2, was platted as not to natural boundaries, but to survey points. And the dike was outside those survey points, so it's not even really on the landowner's land. But over the years, we've allowed the adjacent landowner to pretty much say how the land is used. And that's just the way it's been. And so that's our tradition at the district. That, I don't know what to say. But
So it's kind of sort of muddling along, okay.
I would say that the railroad tracks bisect Brownsmead. It's not part of it. It's not a dike in that particular instance. But where it is along the Ivy Station Road at the bottom of it, where you have, people who own their homes, they use the county roads, they have assessed values, they pay taxes, and the railroad, it does create quite a problem because how can I fix it? How can I maintain it if it breaks? Because the railroad is the dike. And in that particular instance, I don't know if that's something the county can help sort out where there are this multi-jurisdictional thing, but the 10 residents there would just like, it's leaking, can I fix it? And then there's a quagmire, but ultimately they pay taxes to Clatsop County because of the value, and the value exists because of that dike. That's a railroad and a dike, and the fog of time has become problematic. And we also ran into that case there, our Gary Zeke property, where the railroad broke. And then in disagreement with Chris, we did have state people come and say, and insist that the landowners wanted it flooded, and dealt with people from the state, Greg Apke is his name, who created a lot of hardship for the landowners to be able to resolve the situation, but there was unhelpful government interaction that made it very, very difficult to resolve the situation. But $40,000 later from Senator Johnson, we were able to find a solution that worked for everybody.
Well, that's what I was going to say, that the kind of situation you're describing there, that's really, you need to bring in a political representative of your area.
Well, we did.
Yeah, you did. And that's what you need to do, because the county planning department and the citizens here that are trying to revise the comprehensive plan can't deal with that kind of issue. That's a legal issue. And usually a representative is pretty good at bringing high enough of people in the various entities that are in conflict to kind of reach some resolution. So that, to me, that's outside the purview of what we're trying to.
Dirk, did you say the county was helping or was not?
The county was helpful. We're working with Ed Wagner, and he was doing everything
It's that
he
level above
possibly
the
could,
county
but
that
it's
was
like,
complicated.
everybody wants to fix it, but we're not allowed to fix it. We're not allowed to protect their own property that we're paying taxes on.
So whoever owns the train tracks, is that the state? I mean, would they?
the tracks are owned by
Private.
the railroad.
Yeah,
Okay,
the
so
right of way is
railroad.
owned by the state, and then
Yeah.
by
So the railroad
And then
owns
you-
the track.
the time you get near the river, then now you've got, NOAA fisheries, so it really becomes.
So who's paying property taxes on that piece of property that the railroad city owns? Anybody? To the Viking? Nobody's
I
paying
can't
taxes
say
to the
for
Viking
sure,
district?
but in some cases.
It's not a tax lot.
In some
Yeah.
cases, property
Somebody
is
has
on
to-
both sides of the
Somebody
dike.
has to own it if it's the federal.
There's an
Yeah.
easement, there's an easement, I
Yeah, but
think.
somebody still has to own it to give the easement.
In some cases, property owners own property on both sides
Uh-huh.
of the dike, I believe.
And then so then they have to pay taxes on that property that
I'm
the
not
railroad's
sure.
on. Somebody
No.
No.
I don't know if it's an
Either
easement.
somebody
If it's an easement,
does
they have to.
or
It's a possibility.
like the
I could
state
find out, but I
isn't.
don't know.
I mean, I was just curious, because if you're talking about having to come up with money to repair it, and if whoever owns that piece of property is not paying taxes, and that's a detriment to the Viking district.
And the argument would be,
I do.
I'm paying property taxes to the county for services, no complaints. I need to be able to protect that
Right, yeah.
investment, which is in everyone's best interest.
Huh.
So that's something Mark Quayla, county commissioner, from Warrenton knows a whole lot about. It's something I'll be talking about a lot more, I would assume, over time, because it does affect a large portion of Clatsop County in different regions. So.
And I think it's going to be September 25th at the Board of Commissioners meeting, but there is a gentleman coming to talk about tide gates and funding that's available for them. So I'll make sure to get that out to everybody.
And an idea out of left field, when I came here 43 years ago, I did not know what dikes were or tide gates or how they worked. And I would just like to throw out there that if we all wanted to go on a field trip ever, that there are people who could put that together for us. So if anybody is interested in walking out there and looking at a tide gate and, understanding that.
I think it's pretty cool that it works. It works. So.
Well, there were so many pages to them, and the pages, exceptions for the dikes and the tide gates and how they work, it went on and on and on.
Is that something that has to get included in as we're redoing the plan? All those exemptions that?
I think in a table format, just so that we acknowledge that they do exist, and that helps future people realize that they're there. I don't think that we need to list every specific tax lot in the plan, but we do need to have that list administratively. So.
Well, every tax lot in Brownsmead is an exemption. They're all way under 80 and way under, except for Dirk and Weavers, under the income requirements. So the whole place has been exempted in one form or another. But I would prefer to call it grandfather. So,
well, there's kind of two different things you're talking about. I think you're talking about a tax exemption versus maybe an exception to a statewide planning goal. So they're two different things.
Well, actually, I wasn't here for the very first parts of after Senate Bill 100, but I know Cheryl and Ed Johnson have been referred to as having, talked about these things and set aside small lots and small farms when, everything was headed toward the 80-acre minimum. And so I really wasn't here. I came on much later when Kurt Schneider was in their position, and they were actually trying to work out the comprehensive plan, and there were discussions. So I really don't know what was grandfathered. I know, we have this one little retail spot where the old store was, and the rest is
Elton Anderson's is on commercial. His butcher shop.
Yeah. Oh, okay, great. I guess I didn't notice that.
Well, that's where the Walmart's going.
Oh, good.
But I think flexibility, somehow emphasizing flexibility where it makes sense, planning. So.
Another question that was in our agenda is about public health issues and how they could be addressed in the land use plan. I thought of things around like transportation mostly for our area, like being able to get to the public health services, but I didn't know if there were things that other people have thought up with addressing public health. Yeah.
I've actually been to a couple of the ACBO, which is the American Council of the Blind, and there are all these technologies. Unfortunately, you have to have a functioning internet or phone system. I mean, they have things like glasses where there's a literal voice in the ear telling them what they're seeing. So the therapies are available. But the problem in Clatsop County is, A, you can't even get dial-a-ride if you're more than a few hundred yards off of 30. And as to the future, you are going to drive us off our land by not being able to monitor our meds and our conditions, so that we will have to go live in some warehouse someplace else. So, I would love the plan to address that. And I actually think, I don't know what is in this tsunami relief package that the legislator passed. And I'm hoping it's a way for us to have some kind of direct link from this fire hall to our fire hall in Brownsmead, One of the other firsts of Clatsop County is on top of the column is the first cable system ever. It's up there. So I'm sure that's grandfathered, and in fact I know Kurt Schneider used the public utilities exemption in the ag zone to get us our fire hall location in the first place, because it was in Joe Rowan's potato patch, So it's a very complicated thing, but I'm counting on you to keep, make people understand.
So I looked up a different publication by the American Planning Association that dealt with public health, and it actually was interesting to me how much overlapped with climate change in the same way of talking about denser communities that make it for easier walking, transportation, like you're talking about, public, like access to healthy food, which could go with like, you know, local agriculture, access to open space. Like it was interesting how much those things actually did overlap. So I think, again, going like with those broad things, especially in goal 2 where it's all nebulous, is
Right.
some of those like just emphasizing that those need to be like taken into consideration
Or
when
encouraged.
doing the, yeah, exactly.
I can encourage that through language.
Right.
In denser communities, which is what you're advocating for.
Which when we went to the workshop, to your point about how do you enforce that, she was talking about writing language in there that made things actually enforceable so that when, if there was ever an issue, you could take, like if the federal government was trying to do anything, that there was enforceable language in the plan to make, like going forward, to make those things actually like have teeth, that needs to be a part of it somehow. And there wasn't any concrete examples, but that was an idea that was like mentioned as like using enforceable language and enforceable policy management to make sure it's in, yeah, which I thought was interesting. But I don't know, there wasn't necessarily examples, so I don't know exactly what that meant, but I thought that was interesting.
The state has actually hired an enforceability person now, and they have volunteered their services as we do our updates to look at them to make sure that our policies will be enforceable. So,
Interesting.
That's great.
Yeah, I know the high school has, I think they've decided they're going to have a public health center. And I assume that's going to be
So
available to the other. I'm not sure. The security at the schools have gone way up. You know, it's admirable, but at the same time, I don't know if the
Yeah.
general public can use that, and it is a community center. So, but encouraging that through the, you know, fire hall exemptions or whatever. That sort of thing, where public health somehow has a pathway to exist.
Well, I guess I was
Services.
to your point about Walmart, you know, as laughable as it is, the world is changing to a digital model where your food is delivered. So what's available in the area is capricious and very different than what it will be is today. To the point for Brownsmead, though, we, in the Oregon Resiliency Plan, we're pretty much told all of rural Oregon, or all of western rural Oregon, you're on your own for 3 weeks, you know, and, you know, they give you a sign, one side says help, the other says, oh, okay, you know, and that's it, you know, you're supposed to be able to have 3 weeks of meds, food, all the good stuff. Well, it's really hard, we won't, you know, the cattle cop is going to fly over and we'll wait. But I think that the reality of the life after the big quake, because the tsunami thing I think is a big red herring. You know, we got 5 minutes of shaking and everything else is irrelevant. So life in the coastal world after that is going to be very different. And I hope the plan will reflect what the Oregon Resiliency Plan says.
And just to share with everybody, I was on the commission when it was proposed to have I think it was a tsunami hazard overlay zone. And we decided not to do that because arbitrarily you're destroying people's value of their property. So it's a hard thing sometimes.
Gail, what goal would resiliency come under?
7, which would be natural hazards.
Okay.
But I think you'd also want to look at it as part of other goals like transportation and housing and, you know, maybe recreational lands, how they can double as maybe emergency shelters or something. We just got a grant, by the way, to do a tsunami evacuation facility improvement plan. And
We being the county.
We being the county, and to look at how we can take some of these maybe logging roads and turn them into dual-use trails and evacuation routes, and maybe create parks that are also gathering points or places where people can, you know, come to after an event. So
What's the time frame for that?
We just got the grant award on August 22nd. It goes to the board on September 19th to accept it and agree to do the in-kind match. And then it's a transportation and growth management grant. So it goes through Department of Land Conservation and ODOT. They are the ones who will be developing the scope of work in conjunction with us, and then they go out and hire the consultant.
Right,
so
right.
I think it has to be done by September of 2021.
Okay. Wow.
I have a question about public health. So I'm wondering if our city or county has a plan if there was like a mass shooting in one of these like parades or whatever, like how many, I assume we don't have any or enough trauma surgeons in our hospital, like how many helicopters do we have to bring people to, you know, Portland, like how many shooting victims can we realistically treat?
That'd be something for the sheriff's department, I think. In the unincorporated areas, the cities all have their own police.
I did hear
Those are excellent
a surgeon talking about just mass shootings in general, saying like everyone now should be trained in just how to compress gunshot wounds, which is not something I know how to do. So maybe that is something we want to look at, like doing a training for.
How about training for shooting back? Stop the threat.
The schools have done some drills where
Schools
they,
drill,
the
yes.
schools, NAPA has, they were in the paper where they did some. It is
On a
unfortunate
regular
that was
basis.
at this point.
What goal is that, Gail?
Public health.
I don't know what goal that would be. That's a good question.
Is there a public health goal?
Right here, it talks about how public health be addressed.
We don't have a public safety goal.
Public.
Having to do with police and fire and
Pretty soon.
emergency
Public services, yeah.
Yeah.
That could go there.
Public facilities
So-
and services.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we,
Because I think he's right. I think it's the sheriff who could address that and to have him come and speak to us. I think it's very appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, the person in Ohio was stopped within 30 seconds, and there's still, you know, how many people died? A dozen? Like, I mean, you know, it could have been worse. It could have been over 50, but that's still a lot of people that are dying. You know, for our rural community to have to deal with multiple gunshot wounds within a 30-second period, if that's like the shortest amount it can be stopped in, feasibly, you know, I don't think I don't think that like that solves my question.
I think there is, we're in the fire department and they do most of the emergencies are medical.
Right.
They're not fire, like fire trucks. But anyway, I wonder, they may have an answer for that because they all do cross-departmental training. So.
And I think the countywide coordination is getting better. A few years ago, when I was still on staff at Astoria Middle School, and my daughter was first starting to work at Columbia Memorial, they had practiced at Columbia Memorial, and she said our evacuation site for the hospital, because they're in the tsunami one, but also for mass shooting, their evacuation site is to the middle school. And I said, I'm on staff, and I don't know that.
Yeah.
Our staff does not know that the entire county hospital is coming to us.
Oh,
So
geez.
the left hand is gone.
Yeah.
And that was years ago,
Right.
so I'm sure that things are better
Yeah,
now.
I just want to know that like there is a plan of some, you know,
Right,
that this
there
is
are
happening
a lot.
often enough
Yeah.
in random places, you know,
And
like
we're not Portland.
it's a
I mean, we have to have
disease
the-
that's being
the Seaside
spread,
plan and
so-
the Westport plan, and all those pieces, the left hand has to be talking to the
Right.
right.
But in general, there are a lot of plans
Yeah.
that are on the shelf that somebody's putting together in the county. You know, I've seen them, but
yeah.
still an excellent.
I mean, does our hospital know what they're supposed to do in a situation where they suddenly have 50 people coming in that
They
have been
recently
shot?
practiced an evacuation not too long ago.
And some of that stuff has to be kept confidential so that other people don't game it.
Well, how many people are even going to survive a gunshot wound? If you get shot in the head, you get shot in the heart, and your chest compressions aren't going to help anyway.
I mean,
So it
typically
depends
in
on
these
what-
mass shootings, you
what
usually hear
percentage.
about, you know, like
Can be saved.
twice as many like victims as fatalities. So some,
Right.
it depends on the area and how quickly they get to a trauma surgeon. Like, I mean, it's not impossible. Lots of
No.
Yeah,
thousands of people
Sometimes-
survive gunshot wounds. I don't know
Percentage.
how to answer that percentage-wise.
planning somehow incentivizing health related facilities, like wouldn't it be great to have a clinic in Napa Square,
Yeah.
in this general area where somehow, like ag has tax exemption or deferrals or different rates. Somehow I think you could,
Right.
through
I mean,
zoning,
would we be
maybe
able to use the Coast Guard
you
helicopters,
could,
like,
you know, you could like incentivize land use planning in such a way that it would be in somebody's interest maybe to help build that office where you have the, what do they call that? When you go in the, not
Just
the
like an
emergency,
urgent care.
urgent care, you know, stuff like that.
Actually, the county does have a wonderful building, right, where the old road used to cross 30. You go across there, and on the left is this structure. And I've always kind of coveted that for a community center because, as at the fairgrounds, they could build a nice road across, they do 202, but we could go across 30, and so we wouldn't have to get out on 30 every time we want to cross 30. And, you know, so anyway, that's been on my wish list for a long time. It's a nice, I don't know what's in that building, but it's a lovely little building, lots of parking. Anyway, so I would love to see that become a community center with a wellness person and you know, library and places you don't have to go to spend money to hang out, and you know, because there's nothing here. There's nothing here for that. Huh?
Quality of life.
Well, I just don't think you
Health and
should.
reading.
Well, you know, how nice is Two Goats, man? He's, you know, he gave us this internet access because, you know, well, geez, that would be lovely. So I think there's a real opportunity on that. And again, I asked him about having a connecting road between. Granny Patty was a big fan of trying to get a road that came right through here, because then you wouldn't have to go out on 30. You know, those of us who live on the other side, you know, we deal with it. But, you know, you wouldn't have to go out there. You'd have this consolidated town where people in chairs and people in horses and anybody could go from side to side. So,
Transportation as a goal, we'll deal with it.
thank you.
Does anybody have any further discussion on goal 2?
Well, I guess I do, and it's back to what's the chances of getting shot in Napa High School versus some of the other things that budget monies, those valuable budget monies could go for. It's unfortunate that we have to consider it. You know, I'm really glad we haven't had a shooting in our part of the world. I mean, Clatsop County anyway, and I'm not even sure about that. So, but you know, when planners are planning for something that is exceedingly rare, you know, it takes just as much time as something that is exceedingly common. So the goals gives us an opportunity to talk about them, but I hope the resources continue to go to mitigation. And the Oregon Resiliency Plan and many other agencies have all said the return on mitigation is about 4 to 1 for every dollar invested. We're doing planning and things that don't have tangible products. You know, are we optimizing our money? Thank you.
Gunshot fatalities have taken over as the number 1 cause of death for young people. It's more than car accidents now, which is in partly due because cars are safer, but it's unfortunate. They're including suicides as well, but you know, it is a risk for young people especially. So yeah, I do think that it's worth talking about as a public health issue.
Of course it is.
And dedicating resources to.
Great. Well, I'm ready for the background materials for our next meeting.
Okay. So next month we will be talking about goal 3, which is the farmlands.
Does that go with tab 3? Is that?
Yeah, that'll go in tab 3. There's yours, Jennifer.
Thank
Sorry.
you so much.
Yeah.
Where was the tourism supposed to go?
Oh, wherever you want. I would put it in goal 3.
You got tourism? Where'd you get that from?
It was in the mail.
I didn't get it.
Bringing mail.
So anyway, what's in there is obviously statewide planning goal 3 and our county goal 3. There's some information that was put out by the state in 2018 and 19, I believe, that looks at resource land, farmland, gives some statistics. There's an agricultural census that's done every other year, and so I think the last one was from 2017, and that just gives you some statistics about, I believe, age and gender of people farming, and I'm trying to think what else was in there. We've got a farm forest report, the resource lands report. State Board of Agriculture puts out a nice, colorful, graphic-filled little report at the end of the year, their annual report. So this one should be pretty light reading in a way. It's not as bad as Goal 2. Hopefully you can all attend the workshop on Monday with Tim Murphy, the farm forest expert. He'll be there in the morning talking about farms, and then he'll be there in the afternoon following lunch talking about forest lands. So,
And that's this coming Monday.
yep, at 10 a.m.
Are those recorded so we could listen to them? at another
We
time?
record them. Sometimes the video or the audio works. If people don't forget to turn on the mics, the audio works really well. So the one from July 31st, somebody in this room forgot to turn on the mics. And we have video, but we don't have audio.
Does
So
the video work? Does that all work?
yeah, the video worked. So we decided that you could sync it up with Pink Floyd's album there, and then just create your own scenario. But yes.
Too bad. It was a funny meeting. I feel like.
Yeah.
I don't know if listening to it would have captured how funny it was.
And then one other thing, our goal 3 has a lot of statistical information, but no real policies to say, we want to do X, Y, and Z with our farmlands in Clatsop County. So, which I thought was odd. So I pulled from Lane County, maybe not the best example, but an example, their goals for Goal 3 and their policies that you might want to think about, because we're going to have to add.
That's great.
How about Columbia County? They have lots of tide land.
Yeah, I haven't looked at Columbia
Please
County.
do.
That's a good suggestion.
I think, Willamette Valley is obviously agricultural aspect, so.
Which county was this?
This is Lane. Yeah, but I'll look at Columbia. That's a good idea. That's all I have, Jennifer.
Great. Back to the agenda. I think we're done then, but let's see. Closing comments and adjournment. Anybody have any closing comments?
I encourage you all to stay until 6 for the Port of Astoria strategic plan.
Can somebody explain what a strategic plan is, or what exactly they're talking about tonight?
Kind of an analysis of where we have been and where we are and where we'd like to be. Kind of the idea that a lot of boards will go from one thing to the other thing, and they don't follow through with the first thing, and it's not consistent with what's the main thing.
Beautiful. Let me try.
You have the mic on for that, right?
What's happening is it will be big picture of what's happening at the port. She's doing 3 of them this week, and I happened to go to the one 2 nights ago, which was in Astoria. She has a PowerPoint, so I hope the people who don't like it can make it work. And the meeting was just a little over an hour, so it's not a 2-hour one. And she starts out with resources. What assets and resources does the Port of Astoria have? What challenges is the port facing, and how are we going to meet those? And the port, we tend to think of the port as being in Astoria or something at the other end, but the port belongs to all of us, and it's the Port of Astoria, but it's Clatsop County port. And it's, if you know zero about the port, it's a nice entry point. It's not too much down into the weeds. I think she does a really nice job of sort of giving you a snapshot of where the port's at and where they're going to go.
Yes, Chris.
I'd like to just jump back to goal 1 for a moment, which is citizen participation, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
And, I think one thing that could really help, in getting citizen, at least access to a lot of public meetings that go on. I kind of live in Astoria or along John Day River Road, so it's easy for me to get into town, go to the commissioners' meetings, go to port meetings, planning commission meetings, etc. But for a lot of people, it's a bigger hassle to do it, and it just encourages, people running back and forth anyway in gas-eating vehicles or whatever, energy-consuming transportation. So I think as a goal, there should be, the county should flex their muscle, and I don't know exactly how this works, but there's franchises for the carriers, CenturyLink and Charter. And it seems to me that we should cut a deal where if they want their franchise to continue, they need to provide for a local television station that somehow we can broadcast real time the significant meetings that occur predominantly in Astoria, but if they occurred somewhere else, there should be enough portability to allow for it. And I think not many people are going to sit and watch that kind of thing, but
The county did that.
there are a bunch of
The county did. They spent over $90,000 as a part of a negotiated agreement with Charter Communications to have the capacity to video and broadcast from the Bloomington Room. And I didn't support it, but the idea was that it would be an asset for the entire community to use. And then, of course, I don't know if that's something that streams on the county website or is on, of course, you have to have the Charter cable or whatever
Yeah, so.
to watch it.
Yeah, Charter
I'm
reaches
asking for an
1,100
actual
households
station.
in the county.
What's that?
Charter reaches 1,100 households, is offered and available to
Do
1,100.
they have an access channel? that
We
county
have
uses?
there is a local access channel that we can post our meetings to. I don't think they live stream them.
Okay.
And then they go on YouTube, so they are on YouTube. But again, you have to have internet
So
access.
they do have one.
How close are they to Brownsmead? I know they were on Brownsmead Hill Road,
I don't know.
building poles. I saw them doing it.
Charter,
Yeah.
they won't service us.
I know they're down in the Arch Cape Falcon
Yeah,
Cove area.
they ran all their lines like right past our house. We're in the old highway.
Yes.
And I called them several times and they don't have a contract with whatever it is, and they said, and we even had a salesman come in and talk to our business, and we called him back and he says, well, there was something to do with a lease or a contract or something, and they refused to service us. Yeah, so they go right by us, and then
all
that's,
those lines go up.
so we're stuck with CenturyLink.
Well, I believe that the county could do more in cutting better deals with these companies.
I think so too.
In this particular
It's
instance,
essentially a monopoly
Yeah.
practically.
Terrible.
And
Unfortunately, it's a federal communications thing, and they can pretty much stonewall us. I've been to the CenturyLink.
it's a
lobbies.
franchise though that's offered.
the county did do a deal with Charter Communications, so that's,
Well, to me, it really hasn't panned out. Can I turn to channel 16 and see the county commission meeting? No, I can't. That's what I'm asking for.
I think you
Something
can.
anybody can. No, you
I think
can't.
Gail said you could do it on YouTube. When you go.
No, but
YouTube
there is
isn't,
a channel on
isn't
Charter.
just.
There is a channel on Charter.
Public access.
And the
channel.
meeting is on.
What's that?
And the meeting
I'm
is
on
on
YouTube
that
on your
Charter
TV
channel.
for you.
I don't believe it's live streamed, and I don't know when they schedule it. So maybe they schedule it at 3 a.m. on a Sunday
Yeah, well,
morning.
see,
I don't
That's what
know.
I'm saying, that's no good.
Yeah.
But we did get a lot of money from Charter Communications to provide that service.
Well, it's inadequate. The result is
You're not gonna
inadequate.
get
It can be
any more.
improved. Now with that
It took a
attitude,
long
Okay,
it
so
took a
when
long
it's
time to get
time to
there.
renegotiate our contract, we send you in, right?
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, hardball them.
Well,
Well, thanks everybody.
Thank you. Well, for those of us that don't really want to wait till 6 o'clock at the meeting, can you kind of give us an overview? Of 6 o'clock?
Ooh, should I keep the recorder
Mostly,
going?
Or can we just turn charter on maybe and see?